just going pretty much straight. Don't hit any fishing buoys. I'm gonna raise the mainsail.
After being confined and quarantined for multiple months, this was our first trip out onto the water. One of the things with having a boat, there's so many things to keep track of.
You can see here, this pin is not coming through, so we need to lift up on here so that it rotates so that that pin will drop through this hole here. Okay? Okay. Probably should have done a full, thorough inspection of everything, but who would have thought that the pin for the gooseneck would have wiggled itself out? Apparently, that can happen if you're just in the marina for months.
You think you're on top of it, and then you go out to sail, and it's like, oh, surprise.
Okay, there we go.
Our whole goal is to sail south to the Coconut Islands, spend a couple days down there, and then come back up to Magaster so that we can be ready to sail to Malta. I haven't sailed in almost 5 months. Before we really get into this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It's a cliche to say people regret the things that they don't do more than they regret things that they do.
So there's this kind of like little chain of islands here. We go up and around them, but that would add 5 miles, about an hour. There should be a little channel here with a red and green buoy so that we can go through where it's deep enough. Ah, there they are.
It's a really useful thing to keep in mind. When the opportunity comes to do something and you're maybe wishy-washy about it, you're like, I don't know if I necessarily want to do this. It's like, well, what's the other option? What are you going to do? If the option is you're going to do nothing, then maybe you should do the thing just so that you did something. To some degree, we're definitely addicted to novelty. People say that variety is the spice of life. It's what makes life fun. And some people need more novelty than other people, and some people like novelty more than other people. But
it's supposed to be blowing about 17 knots right now. The wind has not shown up as forecasted. We have been able to motor sail, so that has been saving some diesel, but not sailing.
It's nice to be back on the water at the very least.
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we could just sit in the marina and wait for Malta to open up, or we could go and have an adventure and just kind of see what happens and go exploring. And I mean, I'm all about that. Lots of benefits to taking this trip. 1, we get to find out all the problems with the boat before we do a passage. 2, we get to get back on the water and get a feel for the water, so ideally, hopefully, there will be less seasickness. And then 3, it's a bit of a disconnect and rejuvenation.
Well, the wind finally decided to show up, and now we're sailing good. We're doing like 5.5, 6 knots. 15, 20 minutes from dropping anchor. Perfect. At least we're sailing. Good. I had my sunset clock set to Malta, so I thought we had a whole nother hour of sunlight. Instead, we're getting here just after sunset. That's my bad. Keep an eye out for nets too. Do you see those buoys dead ahead? It's like a good 5 boat lengths yet.
Okay, can we go this way?
There's a net. You see that now? Ça va? We're actually on anchor. Good job spotting those nets. Solid proof of concept of why you should drive slow. No kidding.
They just kind of show up out of nowhere. They're just asking us, hey, what are you guys doing? Where are you going?
English? Anglais?
I think we lost them. We've been gliding along here. It's been nice and shallow this whole time. Got all the way down to 2.5 meters. We're trying to get to this island over here, which we can just now barely see, which is surprising to me because we're only 5 miles away, so it must be very flat. So we're dependent on these charts here to kind of navigate our way through. There should be a little kind of slip that we can go through and then get about a mile offshore and then take the dinghy on. Otherwise, we'll have to anchor about 5 miles offshore. We've been going now for 8.5 hours. We've got an hour left, but we'll put Jackson on the bow as a lookout to make sure that we don't run aground at all. I slow down so that we're maybe going half throttle instead of full throttle. I was constantly watching the depth sounder. It was like a good solid 3 meters, and then it pretty much immediately went to 1 meter. And
right here is a net, and so I put it like real hard in reverse to slow us down, and then shut off the propeller, put it in neutral. I don't think we ran aground. We don't have an amazing hold on the anchor, so we've got, you know, 60 meters of chain out and 4 meters of depth, so we should be good, and there's no heavy weather coming. How was that for you?
Yeah, the bottom just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it just popped right up. It said 1 meter on the depth. Yeah.
Saw the net and like we dipped over it. I was like, sure, we're gonna wrap it, but
Yeah.
good work on the helm.
Thanks. I'm not a fan of these unmarked nets. There you go. Stay, please.
we need to go into town because I need to do a bit of computer work. And where we're at right now has really bad cell service.
Stay, dinghy. Everybody's definitely looking at us like, why are you here?
We're just asking people like, hey, are there any restaurants around? They pick us up in a van, and so we all just cram into the front of their van, and Jackson's sitting on the dashboard. They just drive us over to a restaurant that's maybe 5 minutes from the harbor, and we end up eating there. And that restaurant was really great. It just had one fatal flaw. This restaurant didn't even have Wi-Fi or electricity. Jackson came up with this great idea of uploading it from my phone and then using his phone as a hotspot assist.
Looks like about a liter of gas leaked out. So
I heard something really interesting from Jordan Peterson about looking at objects in the world as if they're announcing themselves in need of repair. It's like you've got the boat, you pay attention to as much as you possibly can, you're constantly repairing and maintaining things, and then you neglect one thing and it just isn't going to have it. It's going to scream for your attention. So that's what happened for the fuel line for the dinghy. I'd seen the state of the hose and like, okay, yeah, this is going to need to be repaired in the near future, but turns out it needs to be repaired now because it's leaking a lot of fuel.
made it back on land. Now to see if we can hitch a ride or find a bus to Rimla. Tony and Shannon are on this island. We want to meet up with them. First we'll get to Rimla and then figure out from there.
Tony and Shannon are sailors that have been in Magaster. They're part of the whole community that we've been a part of in Tunisia.
That was like 30 cents, 20 cents a person. This bus driver is a very aggressive bus driver. Pedal to the metal kind of guy.
If you live in the Western world, the concept of something being cheap is different than what cheap actually is. If you go to a country that their currency is not strong, like Tunisia, you really see what it means for like cheap living. The fact that a bus and a taxi to cover about 45 minutes cost us $5.
Why, hello there.
Hello.
Long time no see.
45 minutes and pay 1 dinar 20 for the bus. Or we can go now and pay 6 dinar, which is like $3.
Yeah.
When it's that cheap, it's like, oh, we can just take taxis everywhere.
And that's a good dinghy. What a jump.
One of the things I learned before I started traveling was the idea of being rich is entirely relative. Even if you don't make a whole lot of money in the Western world, there are places in the world in which you can live like a king. The whole secret to that is make money in a powerful currency and spend it in a non-powerful currency. That's like the travel hacking to being wealthy.
You beat me to it. How's the water?
Pretty, it's murkier than it has been, but it's not bad.
Pretty warm. The water. Pretty warm.
We're all gonna encounter problems. Depending on how you want to look at it, yeah, it'll change your whole experience of it. A quote I heard from a friend, she goes by Lotus Sky. I don't know if she came up with this herself or if she heard it somewhere, but if you look at life as a gift, then you'll just be living your whole life unwrapping presents. So much of our experience is shaped by just the way that we decide to look at it, the attitude that we decide to take. I mean, that's basically what all the different religions say, is like most of the suffering is internal and all of that can be mitigated through a different perspective. Before quarantine, it had been a very long time since I had stayed in one place and done a repetitive routine for a long period of time. Almost ran aground again on the way out, but getting there. We got about another half hour of worrying about running aground and then we should be fine.
Okay, I think we're out of it.
There's this concept in physics that the faster you move, the slower time goes. That's theory of relativity, that's just how it works.
Gave us about a knot of speed.
To me, it's very apparent in my own life when I'm standing still in one place, going through a consistent routine. It's like time flies. You end up in a situation like Viktor Frankl. The days feel longer than weeks. Each day drags, but then before you know it, 2 months have passed.
Going to Magaster. Merci, Aishik. Saw them coming literally from, I think, a mile away. I was wondering when they would show up. Total sail was 48.1 nautical miles, 9 hours and 54 minutes. That is, for those who care, an average of 4.9 knots. Anchor seems to be holding fine. I'll dive on it tomorrow, check it, make sure everything looks good. Should be here for 1, maybe 2 days, then move up to Magaster, and then hopefully, Lord willing, sail to Malta.
It's just, time is so variable. At least our experience of time is variable. Depending on how you're approaching it and the perspective that you're taking and what you're doing in your life is going to affect the way that you experience time.
You want to pop over for a stop and go for a swim?
This whole trip, nothing super exciting happened. And the island wasn't even that great, but it's just so important to do things. I think we get put off with the idea of like, well, it's not going to be the best, so why even bother? Then we end up not taking opportunities that are in front of us and not having experiences that we could have had that are valuable. Like, this experience was valuable. It taught me multiple different lessons. We could have missed that had we decided like, well, sailing down the coast of Tunisia is not going to be as good as sailing in Malta or sailing in Greece, so like, why even bother? It's like, well, why bother? Because I haven't been there before. We haven't explored that. We don't know what's down there. We don't know if it's better or worse. We don't know. You put yourself out there in a position to receive engagement with existence. Thank you for watching this week's video. If you enjoyed it, then consider subscribing. And then if you really love what we do here, consider clicking the link and supporting on Patreon. Thank you for watching. Have a great